many genocides, and so there have been many genocides in Latin America and in Africa. This is our history as a European. Denmark has its own. Of course, there are major colonizers, but and Denmark has its own history. But it's so probably you don't feel that responsible for the past, but it's our European past, and so we should do better today. So this is what I aim to do: continue to bring attention to the facts, the context, the history, and what are the international law obligations. And here, let me move to then I will go back to what I think of negotiation. It's a risky argument, but the question of what is my message to the Danish government? First of all, my visit aims to speak to whomever wants to listen, and I think that those who want to listen the most here, considering the demand, is the Danish people. So the point and the message is, my ask to the government is, please respect international law. You have clear international law obligations. Under the law of state responsibility, Denmark is called upon not aiding and assisting an internationally wrongful act. And Israel maintains an occupation which, as I said, is ontologically illegal. So the Danish government should explain, should reveal all the ties that it maintains with Israel, diplomatic, political, military, strategic, research-wise, and should suspend anything that, according to the ICJ advisory opinion, is found potentially detrimental to the rights of the Palestinians. And therefore the minimum is to suspend the arms trade, arms deals with Israel. Not to sell, not to buy. This is something that the International Court of Justice has also reminded member states in the context of the genocide case. There are two cases pending before the ICJ. South Africa versus Israel, and then Nicaragua versus Germany. And in the latter, the court has reminded member states of their obligations not to transfer arms, not to have arms deals with countries which are committing violations of the Genocide Convention, but also the Geneva Conventions. So first of all, there is this responsibility that Denmark will continue to have, even if it tries to circumvent international law and change its laws so as not to comply with it. It will still be a stain on Denmark and will continue to violate international law, whatever the national escamotages are. And then the thing that I want to say to the Danish people is not just your state that has obligations toward international law. Also businesses, private actors. I don't know if it's the case here as in other European countries, but there are double nationals, individuals with Israeli nationality who have committed crimes or who might partake into crimes as individuals, as settlers, as business people who have dealing in the colonies. Well, they should be investigated and prosecuted. And also charities, pension funds, banks. I'm investigating right now the complicity of the private sectors in that monstrosity that Israel has set up in the occupied Palestinian territory. And I'm telling you, there are quite a few businesses, including located in these countries, that I'm investigating, including, it's no secret, Terma and Maersk. It's very complicated. So these businesses should be Maersk and Terma. I'm carrying out an investigation right now. I will do the utmost to also get in touch with these businesses, like other European businesses that I'm investigating. And but again, what I want to say to the lawyers in this country is act, because it's also your job to make sure that justice starts at home. And also ordinary people have a responsibility. There has been a silencing, and I go to the other question. The role of the media in general in the West has been unprofessional, unethical, to say the least, in the sense not only facts and I don't speak of the Danish media because I do not know the Danish media enough. I can only tell you that the Danish media is not immune to cancel culture, given the fact that, again, two important media outlets who had scheduled interviews long time ago with me, cancelled yesterday. So that there is this tendency of not to host, not to give a place, so that the voice is heard. And this is, frankly, pathetic. It's so sad, because in any case, my voice is going to be heard anyway. So it's their loss. But the point is, not only the media have not told the story, they have chosen which story to tell, not telling the facts, not giving context, for example, to what has happened on October 7, which doesn't mean justifying the crimes that have been committed against Israelis. Absolutely, which I've condemned, and I've called for justice for all the victims. So, but there is a context, and that context has often been missed, and also it has been, what has followed has been misrepresented. The Palestinians are, by default, referred to as terrorists, and while terrorism is an act, cannot be an individual, independently from what the acts, the operations, or the ideologies. And also the Western media have amplified the Israeli propaganda. Israel lies, and it's fully documented by commission of inquiries after commissions of inquiry. And this notwithstanding, facts have disappeared and international law has been completely sidelined. That's very unprofessional. But also, I think that there is something worse, because again, there is a genocide, and then there is increasing consensus that there is a genocide ongoing. And like in other genocides, media do play a role. So is the work that international tribunals have revealed in the case of Rwanda, for example, or in the case of former Yugoslavia. What is shocking here is that the international media has made itself complicit. It's not just the Israeli media, and not all of them, of course. There are wonderful journalists in Israel, and thanks to them we know a lot, for example, of how an artificial intelligence has been used to kill hundreds and hundreds of civilians in Gaza at the time. So there should be a study and an investigation on how the Western media have acted in the context of this genocide. One last comment is in connection with the negotiation and the pragmatism. As I said before, sure, but neither negotiation nor pragmatism cannot happen at the expense of fundamental rights. The Palestinians should not be negotiating their right of self-determination. The right of self-determination should be the departure. Once the right of self-determination is realized in the form of statehood as the starting point, then there is negotiation on the relations that Israel and Palestine will have. And one day maybe they will decide, the Israelis and the Palestinians will decide to live happily together, who knows, but the realization of the state is the ground zero that should be pursued.
All right, another question here.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Claire McCarthy. I'm a journalist from Ireland, which, as you know, is one of the few places to have recognised the sovereignty of Palestine, and which is working on making it illegal to import things from the settlers. And in that, my government has access to exactly the same intelligence reports as do all the other governments of Western Europe. They know the same stuff. They know more than we've seen on our television screens. So my question will be this: what explains the reluctance of other Western small countries or big countries to do the morally correct thing? And that is to recognise the absolute right to self-determination of the Palestinians, and to recognise the genocide for what it undoubtedly is. Thank you.
Any more questions? We want to conclude around past. I want to hear.
Thank you. My name is Jonathan Afia. I would like to ask about the West Bank. Francesca Albanese, do you have made a report in late October, among else, warning that the genocide of Gaza may be spreading to the West Bank. And now, precisely after the ceasefire has taken place, we seem to have seen a major escalation in attacks and violence and assaults and even blowing up of houses serially in the West Bank, something which seems to be a kind of Gazification of the West Bank. What is your view of this situation?
Thank you. And there is another one, yeah?
James Brooks from AFP. Given Trump's comments, what's your thoughts on the next stage of negotiations, ceasefire negotiations?
Okay, Ireland. Well, I think that Ireland is a case in point in the sense that I do not think that it's one of the few states that recognize Palestine sovereignty. It's one of the few states in Europe which speaks to the hypocrisy of European countries, because on the one hand they keep on saying, on reciting the mantras of the two state, but then they don't do anything to make sure it happens. So what I think, this is why I say we are living an historical moment. We might not realize what's happening, but the masks have fallen and the hypocrisy is fully exposed, and this might propel changes in the way the rest of the world interacts with Europe, because even that pretense of compliance with international law, that pretense of morality has gone down the drain. And I live in the global south. I move and work across various countries in the global south, and I can tell you that that sense that was also probably a legacy of decades and centuries of colonialism, of primacy of the West and Europe, is gone, and I'm perfectly fine with it. Although, I mean, as a European, I resent it. I would like us to be better, to do better, and we can still do better. I will get to this, but so I do think that Ireland, in as much as has done a lot and has been very vocal, especially because of the people, has still some way to go to give full meaning to the recognition of, I mean, to full compliance and to ensure full compliance with international law, because there are still, I mean, the settlement bill has not been passed, and recently Ireland referred to the fact of its referred to a commitment to endorse the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which I think shocked everyone, if even Ireland does it. But again, this goes to the why Western states in particular, and there is not just the West, there is also, this also applies to many countries in the rest, why these countries do not comply with their basic obligations under international law. Because Palestine is very specific. I mean, Palestine is the state of exception, and Israel has enjoyed impunity like no other state, probably than the United States, in the world. So this is the thing. Israel is, on the one hand, an extension, is the remnants of Western colonialism. It's not considered a Middle Eastern country by the Israelis itself, first and foremost, or any other country. It seemed like a prolongation of Europe. White, non-Muslim Europe. This is the reality. And of course, I know that many Israelis are not Europeans, but you know, I mean, I'm simplifying to say there is this cultural affinity on the one hand. So Israel has projected itself like the bulwark to protect European Western civilization against these orders of savages. Again, this is a colonial language, and the thing is that this colonial language and colonial mentality has a lot of buy-in in our culture, in our European culture. This is something we need to work on. And the thing is that, so it's partly cultural, it's and a lot of it has to do with geopolitical and economic interests. There is a piece of work that I strongly recommend everyone to read by Anthony Lowenstein, Palestine Laboratory. It's one of the most brilliant investigations I've come across on Israel-Palestine, because it really exposes the deep, intimate, real nature of Israel as a military state, a state that produces military services, techniques, intelligence, and weapons, and has historically used the Palestinians, first and foremost, Palestine as a laboratory to test all these, and then to sell its techniques, services, and weapons to all over the world, including many dictatorships. Israel has been in a way, it's not in a technical sense, but the subcontractor of the US to sell weaponry. This is what Anthony Lowenstein reports in his book, to countries, to sell weapons and other strategic services to countries that it would have been inconvenient for the US to trade with, like dictatorships in Latin America, like Chile and Argentina, but also countries that have committed genocides, like Guatemala, Rwanda, and former Yugoslavia. This is all documented, including by Israelis. There is an Israeli lawyer who has done exceptional work on this. So, because many countries buy these services, buy these techniques, buy these tools, the drones, the weaponry from Israel, it's difficult to break that relationship. And this is where our focus, our attention needs to be. The discussion concerning anti-Semitism, it has nothing to do with real anti-Semitism, which is disgusting and still exists. It's still a Western problem. But the reason why anti-Semitism is used so much in the current times is to deflect the attention. The accusation of anti-Semitism is to deflect the attention from the reality that Israel is coming under scrutiny for its military nature and the human rights implications of it. Gazification. Oh yeah, sorry. I should have mentioned the West Bank more in my presentation. Look, I've been since October last year. I've been warning the international community that there were discernible patterns of conduct that Israel had deployed in the West Bank that reminded what Israel was doing in Gaza. And I've been looking at the shoot-to-kill policy that has been used since October 7 more and more by the army and the settlers in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, which has killed now in 15 months around 870 Palestinians in the West Bank and East Jerusalem alone. These numbers are shocking. 200 of these are children. There are over 9,000 Palestinians from the West Bank who have been arrested and detained and often tortured, and apparently many of them raped while in detention. This is something that is shocking. It has happened to the Palestinians in Gaza, but it has also happened to the Palestinians in the West Bank. And also the other trait, the other feature I documented is that there has been a strategic destruction. This is what I told the General Assembly in October, of essential civilian infrastructure, like homes, assaults on hospitals and health facilities, medical professionals and water infrastructure, energy grids, etc. Why? To make life of the Palestinians more and more difficult, to create conditions of life that might lead, in my view, to the destruction of the Palestinian people. So why I didn't conclude that there were acts of genocide identifiable in the West Bank, this is the trajectory. And because we know that genocide is a process, and because we know that genocide doesn't distinguish, genocide is an assault, it's an aimed annihilation, aimed destruction of a people as such, of a group as such. So it doesn't matter if the Palestinians are in Gaza or in the West Bank. They are targeted for ethnic cleansing, and in the process Israel is committing genocide. So let me say, this is why we don't need to conclude that Israel has committed acts of genocide in the West Bank, but what it has done as of the beginning of the ceasefire in Gaza, is telling, because the fighting machine has just shifted from the Gaza Strip toward the West Bank. In one day, Israel has detonated 24 buildings simultaneously. This is not just a war crime. You need to read the totality of conduct against the totality of the people, in the totality of the land that Israel wants for itself. This gives you the sense of why this is genocide and why this is a settler colonial genocide. And then up to the court to determine where certain acts have been, if the court wants to take that local approach to say, oh, in Jabalia we had genocidal attacks and not in Derbala, for example. In Gaza there have been genocidal attacks everywhere, but in the West Bank. But again, we have an obligation, member states have an obligation to prevent genocide. And therefore, what's happening, these similarities should be a warning and prompt action, but nothing is moving. And the question after the Trump declaration, what is going to happen? Let me be hopeful, so to close on a positive note. Again, as I say, I know that this is going to generate panic across the world because it bears huge consequences. We live in a world where the United States are ingrained in our politics, in our lifestyle, in everything we do, in our economies. So this influence is hugely felt, and no one alone will be able to stand against the United States. But this will be the default option. I mean, it will be either subservience, a world made of vassals who abide by this lawlessness and nonsense that is being propagated, and the other will be to take a principled stance and say enough, so start disengaging. And again, I want to hope that the American people first and foremost come back to senses and oppose this system from within. It might not happen, so it's up to the other 191 member states to fix this. And again, it's the entire world, so it should make us feel stronger rather than be fearful. We can do better. This is the opportunity to do better.
Ms. Albanese, thank you so much for your time this morning. I also want to thank you, dear colleagues, for sticking around in spite of the delay. Like I said to begin with, there is an option of having one-on-one interviews, if you so please. Ms. Albanese does have a bit of time on her hands. I would allow for you to have a 5-minute break.
No, I'm fine.
Okay, you're good? Okay. So please approach me if you would like a one-on-one interview. Otherwise, thank you for coming out and have a great day.
Thank you.